Another Voices in Rewilding series. Today we're joined by James Rad. So the first thing we're going to ask is just tell me a bit about yourself.
Well, I'm late to the nature-based solutions game. I have been an engineer in the Royal Navy for 20 odd years, but now I'm very much involved in monitoring water quality primarily, frequently in reservoirs. But I've now sidled sideways, and I'm into looking at urban greening and the monitoring of urban greening to see how effective it is. Primarily with me for flood management and flood reduction.
Very nice. So how do you see river restoration contributing to long-term climate resilience?
I mean, on that side, it's got to be the water storage, building, and slowing the flow, building up that release. But additionally, it's the thing I'm more interested in is that water storage, and improving water quality downstream. I mean, I love the fact that high up in the catchment there are beavers now, and we are you're seeing this evidence of stark evidence of quite turbid water one side of the dam and relatively clear the other side. We need to start monitoring that and actually looking at how effective that is. But I've seen some stark pictures, which is really lovely on that side of things.
Yeah, I think that's the funny thing about doing this series so far is we've noticed quite a few different opinions on questions like this. Everyone believes in sort of different methods and whatnot.
Yeah, that belief. There's an awful lot of this is good. And it's, this is one of the things I'm on this project called GP for Streets, and we're looking at urban greening, and more specifically, it's like DIY urban greening, what you can do in your house and what you can do in your street to improve, to green it. And what's the implication of that? Does it improve flood resilience? Does it improve air quality? Heat stress, well-being, which I think is probably one of the really big ones, and the ecology. Does it change anything, or do we just get more of the same, or do we get species coming in? So you're right, and I think we need to build that evidence base.
100%, yeah. So do you think that nature-based solutions could ever fully replace your traditional flood defence, so things like your flood embankments and dams?
No. Let's qualify that. Higher up in the catchment, absolutely. And I think that's, higher up in the catchment, those smaller streams, definitely. I think that's where we have to go. But downstream, we've changed the urban environment too much. It's too late for that. But, I've got sympathy with people in York, for example, that the river is floods, it's going to happen regardless. There's nothing they can do about it. I mean, they're quite resilient to that. I have less patience with people who've bought houses on floodplains. Maybe not their fault. But then again, you look in places like, I'm in Bristol, and down the floating harbour, they've put in floating mats, and it's changing the look. How much it actually has an impact, but certainly if we move away from just purely does it make a difference to floods, that makes a great difference. And I think from this project I'm on, I think well-being is going to be one of the things that we find is really important. And that's also part of the sales of why we're doing this. Well, that's one of the big benefits, but it's also to do with peak floods and all that sort of thing.
So what do you think the landowners need to do to manage the flood risk, and how do you think they can help to mitigate?
It's all about incentives, isn't it? At the end of the day. We've got where I live, we've got some really rubbishy agricultural land, for example. It was put into, it was taken up during the Second World War, and it's still there. It produces these manky crops of barley or wheat, or and so at the moment we're looking at 3,000 homes being put on that. Now, I think that's we've got we've got to get away from sentimentalism and think, what do we really need? We've got a growing population, so we need housing. We do suffer from floods, and there are, we've changed the landscape so much that we get high peak flows, and we need to somehow stop that. So landowners need to play a part. I mean, improve, whether that's financial or what benefits are they getting out of it. It's a really difficult one, and I went over to some a lovely little sort of suds development, reed beds. It's up in Northamptonshire, and it looks gorgeous. And we're all going, "Oh, isn't it marvellous? We've slowed the flow. We've got evidence of improved water quality." The residents hate it. I'm not sure why, but actually, when it turns out there's no bridge to get across it, and it sort of mucks up the dog walking. And so it's that sort of bringing everyone along, or trying to bring everyone along in a consensus. And I think that's why this building the evidence base, having data, is really important.
They need to be able to see the positives to it as well, rather than just like you were saying, it looks bad or they hate it, for example.
Yeah. And there as with everything, there's going to be negatives, and I think people don't need to be sold this rosy thing which may not deliver. And I think we've got to be realistic of what things what can be achieved. So that realism needs to come in there, and that's achieved by data, I guess.
So from your experience, what type of nature-based approach do you think works, and why would you say that particular approach?
I mean, I think that I maybe if I turn that around, and what doesn't work, it's stuff that's imposed. Doesn't bring the whole community along, and what doesn't work is stuff that's designed but not designed well. If I could use an example, I'm doing some work on some rain gardens in Bedminster and Bristol. Fantastic. If I was to put a number on it, they've got 90% of it right, and it's brilliant. I mean, it really is lovely. We talked to I'm crawling around putting soil moisture meters, sensors in it frequently. So I get to chat to a lot of dog walkers and people early morning when I'm out there. And people are really enthusiastic about it. Unfortunately, the team that did this think that soil is soil. So they've ended up with a soil that's probably is actually quite unsuitable for what the purpose. So it's that knowledge and fully understanding. I mean, don't get me wrong, this is a fantastic scheme, but that one little crucial bit has reduced its effectiveness, let's say. It's complicated. That's the problem, and I think the problem is the more people in the room, the more different views.
I think that's probably quite a big part of it. They've all got to have the same opinion and same sort of plan going forwards. Otherwise,
I mean, you see some. I mean, urban greening. I mean, trees that have been stuck in, sticking trees in the urban environment is not straightforward. And there are specialist companies that have, are successful. But all this costs money, to be, especially in the urban environment. It's really not a trivial exercise of greening. And so it's a significant cost, and I think one of the things we're trying to do is provide the evidence of the benefits. And I think accountancy is one of the big problems. We've got to get away from it just being about money. That's easy to say because the world runs on profit and loss, and it's very simple to say. But if we can show, well, if we do that, you will planting trees, for example, if you do that, you will reduce the heat in this area of the city by whatever degrees, or there's a high confidence we'll achieve that. I think it's easier to sell, but when you go to hard accounting, that becomes quite difficult. And there are various ways of measuring nature and accounting on that side of things, but it doesn't get past the real accountants, doesn't it, in a company?
So when you're working on a project, how do you decide whether your natural flood management or rewilding has been successful, and what monitoring do you put in place to measure it over time?
Well, I'm not really putting in, I'm actually on the monitoring side of things that have already been put in. I mean, we're measuring, if I talk about this rain garden that we're doing, the conventional view is it's a big bucket or a big bathtub, I think is probably a better way of putting it, that fills with water. Well, we're measuring it in the vertical and the horizontal planes and seeing actually how water moves through this thing. And it's far more complicated, as with everything in life, it's far more complicated than just being a simple bathtub. And the other thing is, especially what I found over this wet winter, what's happened previously really determines what happens in the future. And so it's you say this, this will reduce, this will cope with a 20-year flood. Well, yeah, only if the 10-year flood didn't happen 2 weeks before, and then it won't. So there's so much nuance in this, but selling that to people and that discussion with people who it's not their specialism is difficult. Yeah.
We've got to try and help them understand it so that they do, put the investment in and everything.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. You see some people who can communicate really complicated things really well. Those people are gold dust on your project. I haven't really got that, but there are some people that are so good at explaining complicated things and and bringing in a lot of the nuances in. And it's a skill.
Definitely. So what do you think is the biggest barrier to stopping people using nature-based solutions a bit more commonly?
Hard engineering solutions work in general. If I'm putting a flood barrier and I build a metre-high wall that has the capability of being raised, in the future if it gets worse, that provides certainty. Nature-based solutions don't, but I think there's so many other I think we can, with that data, we can understand whether they're going to work. But there's all those other benefits. It's not looking like a horrible concrete wall. And so I think when we've got the data to deal with whatever it's put in there for flooding or air quality or whatever. Once we've got that data, there's so many more things that we can sell these nature-based solutions on, and which I think are very beneficial. But I'm going to bang on back to the same thing: data. Without it, it's really difficult. And you see these schemes that are put in. Housing developments and SUD schemes really annoy me. We've got one being put in near us. The soil's clay. It is not going to sink into the ground, this water. But because they need to do it, the planners who bless them, they're rushed off their feet. They've done a SUDS course and they think, oh yes, I vaguely remember something about swales. Oh, that must be good. There's no follow-up monitoring, and well, actually, that's if they ever actually get put in, because we've just found the soil's clay. We can't actually do it. So we need to come to a holistic way of dealing with this. But that's again, that's expensive.
It's like you were saying, that the hard engineering sounds a lot easier to sell. It's a case of here's a flood wall.
It works. It works. It may not be pretty, but you're not going to get flooded. And to be honest, no matter how much we sell the fact that there will be this species of butterfly will come back because we're doing this planting, if your house is flooding, you don't care.
Exactly.
And it's those but then again, that's sort of that holistic thing. Well, if we looked higher up the catchment, maybe we could do something there to stop the flood defences. But it's not simple, and it really is far more complicated than I believe, I'm sure.
So how do you think you balance flood risk reduction with biodiversity and habitat restoration goals? How can you make them sort of link together a bit more?
I'm not sure I've got a view on that, actually.
It's quite a wordy question, that one. It's trying to get sort of your balance of bringing in the butterflies, like you're saying, and other wildlife, whilst also reducing the flood risk. So it might be like your hard engineering. Obviously, that's not going to help bring in new habitats and biodiversity.
It is that holistic package, isn't it? And what can you say about a concrete wall? Well, you could paint a mural on it. I think when I've been crawling around these rain gardens and you talk to people, they are really enthusiastic about green solutions having been put in. But then they always raise, but it costs so much. And they're right. I don't know is the answer to this one. It's a difficult one. There are so many benefits, or potentially there are so many benefits, but it's, trying to convince someone that's suffering, got a flood risk. It doesn't make any sense, does it? It does. They're not. They're not even on the same question sheet there. So I don't know.
So alongside flood risk, what would you say the other benefits are you see when using nature-based solutions?
There's certainly within the urban environment heat stress. There's a big thing. Depending on what type of urban environment, because it depends on whether this is not my area, but certainly the more canyon-like, the more effective the green, canyon-like from buildings, the more effective green urban greening becomes. But I think it's we are going to live in cities. That's where we choose to live. I think the well-being side is by far what we're going to discover on this project as the benefit. That really improves people's quality of life. Blue or green infrastructure within the city improves quality of life. It improves outlook. I think that's where we're going to find the real big benefits. Costing that, of course, is difficult.
That's always the tricky bit, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Ideas, but the second money gets involved, if people start saying no a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So the final question: if you could give one piece of advice to someone starting out in the industry, what would that advice be that you gave them?
It's a difficult one, as I've come to this late in life. Certainly on the academic side. I think, hang on. Enthusiasm. There are a lot of people out there at the moment in this world, looking at nature-based solutions. Enthusiasm and tenacity. There's quite a lot of startup jobs that you can get involved with that come with the promise of what's to come, but I see a lot of people who enter this world and find it very difficult to toehold into it, and whether they can stay. On the academic side, I've to get to what I'm doing, I've had to do a PhD. Marvelous. But the pyramid in the academic world is really shallow. So as a postdoctoral researcher, the chance of me getting up the ladder about 5%. I mean, on my sort of people I know from doing PhDs and cohorts, virtually all of them got into industry. I'm one of the last in the academic world. It's fantastic. I love. This is the best job I've ever had researching green infrastructure. But it's a tough old road. But then again, I suspect we could say that for most industries at the moment.